what type of advice do you typically give that marketers aren't taking?
People not using or not taking advice. It's really important to do business with people who believe what you believe, especially if you're going to go into a partnership.
We sat down with Andrew Mortimer, aka Morty, co-founder of the Apertto Partnership and former media leader at Sky.
We're the market leader. The more we invest in our brand, the more that creates barriers to entry for our competitors. What we need to do for advertising to be effective, and that is invest in the long term.
Here are the takeouts from the conversation. Biggest mistake the marketers make? Confusing confidence with having all the answers, instead of knowing when to seek and act on expert advice.
If you think about the role of a coach, get their athletes to perform to their very best, not to perform themselves. Take that as a client, you should be thinking, how do I help them perform the best? Not how they help you perform the best.
Trust and transparency really matter. The dark arts of proprietary media may look attractive, but they often create false economies and long-term damage. Let's dive in.
Well, Morty, amazing to have you on the show. Great to have you here.
It's lovely to be here. Thank you very much for having me. Very excited.
And I am going to refer to you as Morty. I know it's only your mum who calls you Andrew,
Yeah.
but so it's Morty from here on in.
Yeah.
No, fabulous to have you here. And we're going to jump straight in. From your purview of everything you've seen across the media landscape, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see marketers making when it comes to media agencies and so on?
So I think, and I'm probably slightly biased towards this one, but I think one mistake I see repeated a lot by marketers and maybe sort of by procurement colleagues is not taking advice. And I think that actually it takes quite a lot of strength and to have the humility to take advice and to know what to do with it and then to make your own decision. So I think sometimes people feel that by wanting to present all the answers themselves, it projects confidence. But I think sometimes the opposite is true. I think sometimes people, particularly in the very niche that the Apertto Partnership works in, should listen, should take advice, but know what to do with it. So I probably know a reasonable amount about wine. Like I drink probably a little bit too much. I've studied wine. I would never go to a restaurant and not ask the sommelier for advice, but I'd know what to do with that advice when I got it. And I think there's an analogy there in marketing or in any sphere. Actually, there's a strength to say, I don't know, what do you think? But to know what to do with that information and then to make a decision.
So we'll get into Apertto in a mo, but straight away, I love that metaphor. So essentially, with all your worldly wisdom around media, are you the sommelier of media?
Well, as I say, in the niche of the niche that we operate in, I think we probably are, right? We set out deliberately to build a business where we felt there was a gap in the market for real practitioner expertise. And I don't think there are people that have the experience that we do in that nexus between a media agency and an advertiser. So yeah, in that very niche little restaurant on that very specific little wine list, yeah, maybe we are the sommelier.
And you see the fine wines and the dregs and the... There we go. We probably stretched the metaphor, but
Stretch that analogy, yeah.
I mean, it's interesting here, right? Because you're clearly giving away a little bit about what Apertto exists in the world, what it does. But coming back to your thought about not taking advice, here's the moment. I mean, what type of advice do you typically give that marketers aren't taking?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think if we were to get into the weeds of specific topics, I think the advice areas that we give that maybe sometimes are not listened to is that ultimately cheap doesn't mean good. I think there's still a temptation at the end of a negotiation to go, right, what's the least amount of money you'll do this for? Right. And if you were going for a job and somebody said to you, what's the least amount of money you'd come and work to me for? You'd be like, yeah, that doesn't feel like a really positive way of starting this relationship.
What a great analogy, by the way. I just have to call that out. Really great analogy. Gosh.
And I think the other area where we've got a very strong position is around proprietary media in the industry. So where an agency buys in advance media space, marks it up and sells it on to clients. We've always been pretty binary on not using that. And it's often wrapped up as a great benefit to clients and things like that. And I get there's a really strong sell on it. There's a lot of risks and a lot of downsides. So quite often we'll give the advice not to use it. None of our clients do. But then you might see a client a couple of years later where we maybe haven't kept working with them and they've fallen back into that trap.
Morty, you're going to have to give us the lay of the land a little bit on this. So we're going to have a whole host of people here who understand intricately what you've just said and others who will be new to the world of media. So can you perhaps just give us a bit of that overview as to how it sort of works? How does this operate? How does this landscape operate?
Yeah, so proprietary media, inventory media, principal-based trading, media purchased at our own risk are the sort of terms that are quite often used. But essentially, it's the same thing. I, as an agency, might approach a media owner, prepay or pre-commit to a lot of media space, and then either just mark it up pretty directly and sell it on to an advertiser, or take all of that inventory, blend it around in the sausage machine and turn it into a product, a TV product or an online product, and sell that to the client saying, oh, there's some clever data around it. There's a real benefit to doing it. You're getting inventory you might not otherwise. But essentially, it's mostly stuff that's been bought and marked up, and the agency is taking a margin on it. And the problem with that, of course, is the agency is then incentivized to sell that, to recommend that to the advertiser, because that's how they're making money. And there are many agencies who have been making much more money from selling advertising to their clients than from buying advertising for their clients.
So this is the world of dark arts that I think we'll go back to. Mine, in a nutshell, from what you've said so far, is you get what you pay for. There's a false economy. Be circumspect. If it looks too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true, etc. And I know you help a lot of clients through that to make sure that they're not hoodwinked in this world of dark arts. You're a bit of a guru in the world of media, but what got you started into media per se? What was the point of ignition?
I came out of university. I wrote begging letters to a bunch of ad agencies and spent a week at JWT, a week at Bartelberg Hegarty, and then initially a week at Saatchi & Saatchi. And I just basically didn't leave. And eventually they started paying me, not very much. And then from there, what was work experience in what was the new media department, which fitted in one very small room, I fell into the media department, and I realised I loved it, and still do. What was, I suppose, I really appreciate about media was my job ultimately was to take all this amazing work that was being developed and making sure that it was seen or heard, right? Because otherwise it was going to be sort of seed that fell on stony ground. And not just making sure it was seen or heard, but knowing that if you found that magical moment to talk, it was going to have like a really multiplicative effect, that the ad consumed at the right time was either going to have impact or disruption or relevance or standout. And like I was never going to be the creative, but there was a creativity about media planning, media strategy that gave you the opportunity to really take that ad and do what it was supposed to do, which was to connect with people and make them think or feel or do something different. And yeah, it was just in my blood. I just loved it from the off.
Today's program is brought to you by two fantastic organizations. First up is Studio Space, a leading on-demand marketing agency platform. Studio Space gives marketers complete control over their projects, from matching the right agency to your brief, to managing contracts and invoicing, and even tracking all of your spend data all in the one place. They take care of everything and it's totally hassle-free. They even guarantee the work. So check out Studio Space today. Our second sponsor is the Marketing Skills Trust, a charity with a mission to make marketing a better place for everyone. They provide grants to help create a more equitable industry and support initiatives that really do drive diversity, inclusion, and create opportunity. The trust has been instrumental in leveling up the marketing skills across the board. And do take a look at their website for more information. Now, let's get on with the show.
And then Sky, biggest, I don't know if today, but certainly then, the biggest advertiser in the land. So this is a big deal. You're then suddenly you're at the forefront of media.
Yeah. Sky, to start with, just to say, Sky is an awesome company. Like, it is just a brilliant business. I think from the outside, it looks like quite a tough culture. I think historically, I know historically, it probably was. There was some pretty poor behaviours, but certainly by the time I was there, Jeremy Darroch was CEO, and it was a real blend of high performance but strong values. You did have to bring your best every day, right? And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed being surrounded by brilliant people who were bringing their best every day. I love this idea that success was something to be built on, not dwelt on. Like, what was done, right? We had a great year or a great quarter. That's in the past. It's like, go again. And that restless mentality for improvement, I think, really resonated with me. And there was a really interesting mentality. So Jeremy, our CEO, was the CFO. He'd come early in his career from P&G, and I was once asked to go and see him. He'd asked my boss Robert at the time. He said, "What's the number? How much should we be spending on brand advertising?" And I was like, "Oh, great." So I spent a couple of weeks coming up with 7 or 8 different ways of setting the budget, right? You know, share of sales, share of voice, share of market. We had some econometric stuff, some performance-led, a few different metrics. And I gave them a bit of a weighting and the confidence we'd have in each one of them. And then I said, all right, the number is 104.8 million. And Jeremy said, that's great, but I want to go the other side of optimum because we're the market leader, and the more we invest in our brand, the more that creates barriers to entry for our competitors. And I was like, wow, right, this is a CEO who was the CFO saying spend more. And, you know, it's probably the P&G in him that understood that. But what a brilliant conversation to have if you're the steward of that budget and you want to make sure that you're sweating every pound of it, that you've got the backing of the CEO. He's looking at you and your team, and I had a wonderful team, as an investment, not a cost.
Yeah.
Right? We are creating a brand, and the stronger our brand is, the harder that is for our competitors to disrupt our business.
So I love that. And it feels like in many organizations, the antithesis of that happens today, where the CEO and the CFO see us as a cost center as opposed to a growth center. And therefore leads you into a cycle of short-termism as opposed to the brand build exercise that Jeremy was advocating for at Sky. So can you maybe talk to a little bit about how, if someone's in those shoes, maybe a CMO listening in at the moment is in those shoes, how do you overcome that? What are some of the tools, techniques, insights that you can give to get people back to more that brand lens and see us more of a growth center?
Yeah, look, I think it's the $6 million question. Well, it's probably the $40 billion, however much we spend in advertising now in the UK. We increasingly work a lot with clients on measurement. We talk about the measurement system, this idea, a little bit like that game Downfall, of all the cogs that click together, how short term affects the long term, the inputs affecting the outcomes. I feel a little bit like there's not just one Cassandra, but hundreds of Cassandras in this business. So Cassandra was from Greek mythology, you remember, is the girl who's cursed to see the future, but no one will believe her. And she according to the Greek myth, she sees the downfall of Troy. She sees, don't take the horse in, it's full of Greek soldiers, beware the Greeks bearing gifts and all that. You've got so many people, the Benjamin Fields, the Byron Sharps, so many econometricians that talk about what we need to do for advertising to be effective, and that is invest in the long term. But I know you guys know Richard Shotton, and Richard will talk about our different biases, and one of which will be that whole, that applies to everyone except me, doesn't it? Because for me, I can just do more and more performance. And there are some interesting cases where we've seen in businesses the impact of moving from brand building to short-term performance. P&G probably did it 15 years ago. Like everyone, they did it ahead of the curve. They learned, and they're back into that brand building world. But still, people think it's, it doesn't apply to my business. A lot of it is about having the right measurement metrics in place and the right time horizons to measure over. As I say, we do quite a lot of work now helping our clients set up those measurement systems to help find the right measurement partners. Like, we're not econometricians, but we'll help connect our customers with the right partners to do it. I think it's also about having finance, ideally the CFO, having a stake in that outcome, and like getting them around the table when you're talking about measurement. So it's not just, the marketing team would say this, wouldn't they? Where we went through quite a big process of in-housing econometrics when I was at Sky, partly because although we were the biggest advertiser, we were doing it on more and more things. Right? I talked about the number of launches that happened in the sort of between 2010 and 2021 when I was there. So we had a lot of mouths to feed, but we also needed to understand what, if you advertise one thing, what was the halo effect on the others? Like when we advertised broadband, we sold TV, and you're like, what? So how do we understand this? And that econometrics team now that started out with a few people is now 40, 50 people, brilliantly led by a chap called Tom Hallett now. But they're not just about marketing; they're about pricing, they're about content acquisitions, and the business has believed in them and believes in the answers they come up with. So getting more stakeholders than just marketing, I think, is important.
Brilliant.
You had a great run there. And then CNBC acquire. And then ... you join Scott and form Apertto. So what's the sequence of events?
I suppose I got to a place where the Sky business was changing. Sky, by the time we bought, had actually become bigger than BT in market capitalization. So we'd gone from being the challenger to being the challenged. We'd gone from these fairly crappy little offices off the A4 to the Sky Central, which is, if you've been to the Sky office, it's like Mountain View or Menlo Park. It's an amazing building. And I think you probably saw a place where the next phase of Sky was a different phase, and you know what, Sky's probably gone from being the challenger to being the challenged, but they have got an awesome leadership team, and I'm sure they'll continue with going from success to success. But for me, I think some of that entrepreneurial continuous development was, you could feel that was maybe going to be different. And I'd always been cautious about doing my own thing. I'm acutely aware my personality type is I want to be in a team. I probably talk too much. But talking things out for me is part of the process of problem solving. So I needed a sounding board and a business partner, and Scott was that. So we then started essentially a new company, the Apertto Partnership, back in 2021. We kept Apertto. Really like the name. Aperto means open in Italian. Scott's wife is Italian, and he was thinking about a name and saw Apertto everywhere, and then realised it was in all the shops because it meant open. Come on in. But actually, that's what we're about. We're about openness and trust and transparency. And as I say, I think it's really important to do business with people who believe what you believe, especially if you're going to go into a partnership, right? So we do have a same core set of beliefs, which is about how we make this business better. How we make this business for everyone, for a media planner, an agency, for an advertiser, just better, and how we eliminate bad practices on the client side and bad practices on the agency side. And so that's been the thing that has driven us. You know, we want to build a business that we are proud of, that we would want to work at, but is led by a set of principles. And I think we also saw a sector, and it's not much of a sector, but an area, if you like, that was up for disruption. If you look at the people that operate in that, we sometimes get called intermediaries. I hate that expression, but you know, ultimately your customers decide who your competitors are, right? So where our customers put us, I look in that space, and I think there are some legacy businesses that have grown up, you know, measuring media delivery and the kind of classic media auditing thing, and have built those sorts of legacy models. There are some businesses with quite opaque practices. This has come out recently, the whole pay-to-play thing, where agencies are paying an advisor to recommend them for a pitch list, or even worse, they're appointed and they give the advisor a percentage of their income to the advisor as almost like a kickback. And I'm like, well, again, how can you be aligned to your customers' goals? But the big thing, in all honesty, was that practitioner expertise. There's some wonderful people in the advisory sector. However, not many of them, not any of them, have run the media department at the largest advertiser in the UK, or have got the trading experience that Scott's got. And so that's the business we tried to build, bringing in people that were, you know, one of the team was senior commercial guy at Group M. He'd be the person you would have having a contract negotiation with. He'd be the person on the other side of the table. And we have that person. So our clients have that strength. We've got people that have been, you know, heads of media at Coca-Cola Western Europe and have managed big agency relationships, people that have run, you know, O2 agency side. So we're used to seeing stuff in a way at that kind of senior practitioner level, which means we've worn the shoes of everyone around the table when we're with clients and agencies. I think that means we have empathy and understanding for both sides, and often that's missing.
Well, I hear you. It's funny, Morty, as you were talking about the industry and the industry practices, it reminded me somewhat of wealth management, certainly in the good old days when you had mortgage advisors or wealth advisors, and in effect, they were the ones who were getting paid from the people that they were getting, who were there to recommend, in effect.
Yeah.
And therefore, how can you be the client centricity or centric if you were, you know, sitting behind there?
That's a really, really good analogy. And in a way, because that whole impartial advice thing, or tied advice or independent advice, affected consumers and individuals, obviously the government was going to step in, right? Because you don't want consumers and individuals to get impacted. Because some of these behaviours happen in advertising, it affects businesses, the government is disinclined to intervene with that.
Right.
It's like, they're big enough and ugly enough to look after themselves, right?
Yep.
But it is absolutely bizarre. Yeah. If it was impacting consumers, it would be illegal. Yeah.
Wow. And by the way, and interestingly, all of that space got very regulated about a decade ago now.
Yeah.
And what you're describing here today is it's still not the case, and there's no tight regulation on this sort of part of our world. So how does someone navigate through this? I think we're getting into sort of what we've termed the dark arts of the space. But I mean, you know, how do people navigate sort of through this lens? Because if you're being bucketed in the intermediary space, which you hate the term of, but in effect, if there are people out there like that, what are brands what are brands meant to do?
So I think it starts with client leadership and building the right model. There are a lot of clients out there, a lot of advertisers that treat agencies pretty badly, right? And I've been 15 years agency side, running planning departments of the agency going, and my people knew which clients were behaving badly. And not just commercially, but just from a value set, from a behaviours, manners, frankly. And those clients will just get treated badly in return. Ultimately, they won't be able to have good talent in the business. They'll have high churn rates. People are not going to go the extra mile, work super hard for them. So I think one of the things that this whole piece starts with is client leadership. And I'm always fascinated by this idea that we talk a lot about being a leader or a coach in organisations. So we do all this training, like, how to be brilliant for your team and take barriers out of the way. And then somehow when we go to third parties, we start being a manager and a boss again. So some people have these expressions like supplier relationship management and partner management. The best clients I see are the ones that take those principles of leadership and apply it not just within their organisation, but to their agency partners as well. That they go, I can't see almost the dividing line between where the client ends and the agency begins. Everybody's treated well. Everybody's treated with respect, with fairness is listened to, and things like that. We talk to our customers about this principle of client as coach. I'd say sometimes the whole sort of sports coaching analogies can be overplayed because business is different from sport. But if you think about the role of a coach in sport, the role of the coach is to get their athletes to perform and to help them to perform to their very best, not to perform themselves. So if you think then, take that as a client, your role, especially if you're managing an external agency partner, a particular media agency, you're giving them millions of pounds of your money. Like you're literally handing your,
maybe the biggest expense line. Yeah.
You should be thinking, how do I help them perform the best? Not how they help you perform the best, right? So if you start with that mentality, you start in a different place. It's like, how do I take those barriers out of the way? What is not happening for the agency to perform to the best? That might be in ways of working. It could also be in commercial, right? So one of the things that comes back to the commercial side of it and the dark arts is, how am I contractually creating a relationship where they're not able to use proprietary media or use some of these dark arts, but I'm paying fairly.
Yeah.
I'm not going, right, I just want it cheap, and then going, well, that's not profitable. Right? How can you run that without some of these dark
Surely
arts?
marketers get this. Come on, guys, surely. Buying cheap doesn't equal quality and therefore not profitable. Come on.
I think I've talked to several CMOs in the last 6 months who say it's a black box. I get a low CPM. I mean, I know I'm probably paying a bit over the odds here and there, but whatever. And abdication of responsibility. And I think it's born out of a lack of understanding. So the question I've got is, how is trust built? We had Rachel Botsman on the show a few years ago now.
Yeah.
And she talked about trust being a comfortable relationship with the unknown, which means I know what people are thinking or doing when I can't see what they're thinking or doing.
Yeah.
But when people don't really understand the model of agencies, then how is trust built?
Yeah, I've seen Rachel speak, and I really like that definition, a confident relationship with the unknown. I think there's a couple of things. One, obviously, to be trusted, you need to be trustworthy, right? And trustworthiness is something I think that comes with consistency. So, because we should come back to the whole client client as coach and leadership mentality, because it goes beyond just that commercial piece. But sometimes the agency will go, I'm just doing a little bit of that. It was 20% or something like that. But if I had a conversation with my wife and she said to me, I'm going to be faithful to you most of the time, I'd be like, is there a version of that where it's all the time? Because like some things you just want to be a totality, and the inconsistent application of trustworthiness leads to a breakdown in trust, right? You don't have a confident relationship with the unknown. What's happening in that 20%? And it can be a bad apple. So I think it's perfectly possible. We set up relationships for our clients all the time that don't use that. And what is amazing, we have clients where we've done projects and we've fixed contracts and set it up. And then a few months down the line, the marketing director of one of them, she said to me, it's unbelievable. It's like the planning team are re-energized and the work is so much better. They're coming up with all these ideas. It's because like 50% of the plan wasn't predetermined, right? They've got to actually plan as opposed to sell. So I think there's stuff you can do contractually, there's stuff you can do commercially, but you can come back to this idea of client as coach. There's stuff you do behaviorally, right? Is if I block all the crap, then that's almost like heat and shelter and Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The next thing is I've got to have a team that trust me as a leader to be consistent, to bring them in, to help understand what they are there to do. We talked a lot to our clients about building the operating model, which starts with the client operating model, which again starts with what is the role of marketing? What's the role of advertising? What's the role of media for the business, right? How does it contribute to the the business outcomes? And then you go from that vision, what the tasks we need to do, the structures, resources, the ways of working, how it's all measured, etc. And then that in turn drives the agency system. And the agency system should be about what's our plan for talent? How are we incentivizing them to drive what's important to us? How do I articulate my vision for what advertising is doing to that agency? What's the plan for continuous development of the relationship and all of that? How do we put that in a scope and a contract and all that? Then that's kind of ultimately lower order. But the number one predictor of a high-performing team is, do you have a sense of mission and how I contribute to it, right? So if you can't articulate your advertising mission, your marketing mission to the agency and make it clear how they contribute to it, and you might talk about the sort of Simon Sinek start with why type approach, but the ultimately the real purpose behind it, they're never going to be really super engaged, and they're not trust you as a leader. And then the second thing after mission and how people contribute is that idea of psychological safety, right? I think it was written about quite a lot a while ago. It feels like it's got lost a little bit. Like, do my team feel comfortable speaking up? Will they be listened to? Can they feel that they're making those contributions? And if as a leader of an agency relationship, not just your internal relationship, you can deliver on both those things, you are well on your way to having a high-performing relationship.
It's really relevant and what some great insight there. In fact, just a few weeks ago, we were speaking to a CMO, and they literally then said that I don't know who to trust, and therefore I'm just going to try and in-house the lot. Is that a trend that you're seeing more and more of? I mean, how does that sort of work, and why? I mean, when you talked in the early part of the interview, you said, well, actually, the role of the agency is to buy this media, to then package up, and then sell on, which is the problem. If I was a CMO, I'd just go, well, why can't I just buy the media myself?
Yeah. So again, it's important to say it's not all agencies and it's not all the time, but is definitely a feature of the last sort of maybe 20 years of the media industry. In-housing is really interesting, I think, because for agencies it's an existential threat, right? Like disintermediation of agencies. So the agency's always been super worried about it. And there are a number of reasons why you might in-house. Trust and transparency is definitely one of them. I think probably more often clients are in-housing because they want to either move faster with more agility, or they have maybe particularly good first-party data, maybe in e-com, and they want to link the media activation more closely to the sales journey. And it is definitely a feature. We did a project last year for one of a huge advertiser who were in-housing much more executional execution of their media budgets, but they had a really super strong data set that was helping them drive that. I think about in-housing on if you think there's a spectrum of tasks around media to be done, from media operations at one end to sort of the running of the relationship to buying traditional offline media at the other. And most clients have in-house some elements of media operations. They've had a head of media, a media specialist in the client, and then some have gone further. Right, let's think about how we in-house data, measurement, maybe search, paid social, programmatic, and very occasionally someone gets all the way to the end. There are obviously risks involved with that. We used to talk about in-housing when I was at Sky, and a rough calculation, we were looking at probably 70 to 80 FTE to do that, to in-house then, and it would probably be more now to in-house our media. But then I also think about the FTE that's needed around that, the support staff in HR and IT and everything else. And then they're with me, they're in Osterley, right? How are they kept current? How are they learning? How are they exposed to the outside in? And one of the huge advantages of an agency is you get access to amazing talent that you can just sort of borrow or rent for a little bit. And I think the in-housing should never be a knee-jerk reaction to a bad agency experience or a lack of trust. You need to go back to the root. It should be a strategic decision, go back to the root causes or the root reasons why you might do that, and then make a decision. Because if the decision to do it is just because of lack of trust, give us a ring and we can sort that out, right? But if the decision is about actually there is a strategic opportunity to create more value for our organisation by having this capability within our organisation than without, and we do have many clients that work in that way, then fine. But it's not easy to do. Yeah, it's not easy to do and to do well. And sometimes it could be, as I say, either a knee-jerk reaction to a lack of trust or the whim of a performance leader who's gone, I'll just in-house it because then I can build a little empire.
Got it. Wow, what a fascinating conversation. I mean, we meandered across so many topics. It's been really, really great. Just as a final thought, if you had any advice for somebody who is a media planner or looking after media brand side, what would be, your rapid fire, these are sort of the insider advice that you'd give them?
So I think the number one challenge for people in media is not understanding the fundamental economics of how a client makes money, particularly in media agency. So if you're running a media agency relationship on the client side as a sort of brand manager or media manager, and we we run a 2-day training course for ISBAR on the Media Excellence Certificate. And I always talk about this is, does the agency, and if you're being honest, do you understand the fundamental economics of how the business makes money? Because advertising, marketing communications, marketing is not an end in itself. Right? It should be in service of the commercial outcomes the business is trying to drive. So my number one bit of advice would be, make sure that's the case. Make sure you and your agency team understand the fundamental economics. And do you know what? If you ask the finance person to come and present to the agent, they love that because they're normally not allowed out. True. So spend time with your finance team and do that. I think after that, it's, as I say, mission, right? Now we understand what we're here to do and how we contribute to it, right? That's the mission. And then it's, right, how do I build that psychological safety? How do I have a team that feel like they can contribute, they can speak up? That's the sort of road to self-actualization. I think there's all the commercial and contractual stuff, but that's much lower order.
Love it.
Morty, been a pleasure hanging out with you as always. Loads of tips, hints, advice packed in there. Buyer beware, fool's gold, false economics, etc. Thank you for your insights.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, Morty.
Thank you.
Great.